Hi there, I'm Kate McClellan, and I've been a professional wedding planner for over 20 years now. I started Planning Collective when I noticed that though most couples are super excited about getting engaged, they quickly feel overwhelmed and intimidated by the actual process of planning their weddings. If left unchecked, this can lead to massive burnout and the urge to scrap all your plans and just elope. While this is totally normal, you don't have to sacrifice your sanity for your dream wedding. In the Wedding Planning Collective podcast, I'm going to share the processes, tips, and tools that all engaged couples like you need to feel confident, supported, and excited about your wedding plans again. Let's get started. Hey there, before we get to the episode, I have a quick question for you. Have you been unsuccessfully trying to shake that feeling that you're forgetting something when it comes to your wedding? You've got the Knot app and you've downloaded countless other planning checklists, but you just can't get rid of that sneaking suspicion that there's something you don't know yet. It's a very common feeling when it comes to wedding planning. So much so that I decided to put together a free resource to help get rid of what I call FOWO, the fear of wedding oversight. Yes, it does include that 12-month task checklist, but that's just the start. In addition to the ultimate wedding planning checklist, my new Don't Forget list also includes a wedding vendor checklist, your shopping list, a packing list for the wedding weekend, and a complete wedding item setup list to make sure that you are truly not forgetting anything when it comes to your wedding. And you heard me right, this list is free for you to grab right now. Just head over to planningcollective.com/forgetting and it's all yours. That's planningcollective.com/FORGETTING, and let's get rid of that FOWO together. All right, let's get on to the episode. Hey guys, Kate here. Welcome back to another episode of the Wedding Planning Collective podcast. Took a little break, but I am so excited to be back with some new episodes for all of you engaged couples out there. And I'm guessing that most of you are going to relate to this episode. Many couples feel like their budget grows every time they turn around or with every decision they make. And there's some really common culprits that are responsible for why these budget items keep growing or are unexpected costs that you maybe didn't plan for. Today, I'm walking you through 15 of the most commonly missed wedding expenses. I hear it all the time. Couples are worried about what they don't know yet, right? And a lot of it comes down to the budget and it's related to expense items. There's common items that couples either don't know they didn't need to account for, or you forget. Maybe you think about it early on and you don't realize how much of an impact it's going to have on your budget. Next thing you know, $2,000 or $3,000 later, you're scrambling to try and figure out what happened. But here's the good thing. These aren't random, unexpected costs for the most part, right? They're predictable. They show up for just about every couple's budget, but they're often not in the budget breakdowns that you see on sites like Zola or The Knot. So if you don't know what you're looking for, it might catch you off guard. But I don't want that to happen to you. Before we jump in though, a quick reminder, every couple should have 5 to 10% of their total budget set aside for miscellaneous costs. If you're at a traditional venue, meaning like a banquet hall, a hotel ballroom, something like that, that's a traditional event space that includes your catering, your rentals, all of that is all done at the one venue, you can probably get away with 5%. If you're at a unique venue or having like a backyard wedding, you're going to want to up that percentage to about 10%, if not a little bit more. And the reason for that is you're going to have a lot more of the unknown costs, rental costs, catering, bar service, gratuities, all of that we'll get into in just a little bit. You're going to have a higher percentage of those categories versus the traditional venue. Either way though, having that 5 to 10% of a miscellaneous fund set aside is going to make sure that even if you come across some expenses that we don't talk about here that you didn't plan for, because there are going to be some things that pop up that are truly specific to either you as a couple or your venue. But if and when those things come up, you know you're in good shape because you have that 5 to 10% set aside for those unexpected costs. Okay, let's get into the 15 hidden costs that often pop up for couples. And I'm going to break these down into categories to make it a little bit less of like, let me just spit 15 things at you. So the first category is going to be service fees and taxes. And I want to start here because it's often the biggest amount as far as like dollar amounts go, right? So service fees, taxes, venue fees, operational fees, administration charges, automatic gratuities. Every venue and every catering company is going to word these differently and break them down differently within their billing. And this can really be where couples accidentally blow past their budget by like 25 to 30%. And it's not necessarily because you overspent, but it's because that fine print was either too tiny that you missed it when you were first looking at the contracts, or it wasn't clear what those items were for when you first booked. For example, if your venue says the food and beverage minimum is $20,000, that's not necessarily your final number. That's kind of the starting point because you still have to add in sales tax, service charges, and possible administration or operation fees. Depending on your location and the contract with the venue, that can easily add thousands to your food and beverage minimum. Some venues are better than others about being upfront about this, but at least here in Michigan, almost every venue, when you're gathering information or just a general inquiry, you're going to see somewhere, usually along the bottom in a much smaller print than the rest of it, is going to be something that says plus tax and service fees. Here in Michigan, the tax is going to be 6%. That service fee, administration fee, operations fee, it's called something different at different places. That is often 18 to 26%. So add that 18 to 26 to the taxes, that's 6%. You're possibly going way over budget just in that one category, right? If that's not something you're accommodating for. The other big mistake that couples will make is assuming that that service fee, operations fee, again, whatever it's called, is the gratuity that will be given to the staff. Sometimes it is, but often it's not. Often that fee is used to cover the planning staff. So the staff in the office, the meetings that you have, touring the venues, talking about the layout and all of that. Not here to say whether that is right or wrong, but often that is not the gratuity that goes to your wait staff. So on top of that 18 to 26%, you may also be responsible for a required gratuity for whether it's your bar staff, your wait staff, or whatever it might be. Now, again, I'm coming to you from the States. I know tipping is a whole different thing in many other countries, but most of us feel like you want to at least tip the bar staff and the wait staff. I have other episodes talking about vendor gratuities and other ways you can thank your vendors, so we're not going to go into all of that today. But the most important thing is to make sure you're understanding what that service fee covers and what it doesn't. So if you want to make sure that you are tipping the bar staff and the wait staff, that is accounted for in your budget and you're not just assuming that that's what that admin or service fee covers. The other piece I want to talk about when it comes to food and beverage minimums is that the food and beverage minimum is typically just that. It's just for the food and beverage. Most of the time, any rental fees, coat check, valet, anything that you're adding in to your booking with the venue usually does not go towards that food and beverage minimum. So if you're booking a venue that has that $20,000 food and beverage minimum and you think, okay, we're easily going to hit 15,000 with the number of guests we have plus the 5,000 room rental, we're golden. We're good. We don't have to worry about that minimum. Make sure that you're asking what is included in that, because chances are that room rental fee is not going to count towards your food and beverage minimum. So that alone could take that couple up $5,000 than what they were anticipating if they had thought they were including that in that initial breakdown. So for those of you that haven't booked your venue yet, that is a huge thing that I want to make sure you're taking away from this. The minimums do not necessarily equal the totals. Burn that into your brain before you book your venue. Make sure that you are looking at what all of those details mean so that when it comes time for final payments, you're not surprised with like an added $5,000 to $10,000 that you weren't anticipating. All right, category number 2, we're going to talk about the people costs. Most couples budget for the venue and your guest costs, but you forget to budget in for some of the other humans that are going to be involved in your wedding day. Vendor meals can be a big one, especially if you have a band. Any vendor that is with you during the duration of the reception is likely going to require a dinner, some kind of meal. So, your photographer, your videographer, planner, DJ, and again, band, you're going to need to have some sort of vendor meal figured out for them. I know many of us don't have your job supply a meal for you, but honestly, that's just the way it is in the wedding industry, at least again here in the States. It is common to have your vendors require a meal, the ones again that are with you all day. So, photographer, videographer, planner, and the ones that are there throughout the reception to have a meal planned for them. Most venues or caterers will offer, at the very least, a discounted price for the vendors. You're certainly not paying for the bar service, for the appetizers, but they do need to have a meal supplied for them. And so you want to make sure that you're accounting for that. I will say most couples, it's 4 or 5 vendors total. If you have a band, though, that could be 12 to 15 just for the band alone. The other component you want to think about is, where are the vendors going to eat? I will say my preference, and I think most other vendors would agree with me on this, is that there is a separate area to eat. Some venues, the only option is going to be to seat the vendors in the same room as the rest of the guests, if not at the same table. Most vendors prefer a different area, whether it's the cocktail area, if the venue has like a separate boardroom, or a back of the house area where the vendors can eat. That way, it just gives the vendors like a true chance to like decompress and slouch and, shovel some food in their face without feeling like they have to make conversation with the guests or feel like they're still, in front of the guests and being professional, to be honest. If your venue, though, only has the option of having your vendors seated in the same room as the rest of your guests, you may also have to budget for linens, chair rentals, a centerpiece. Well, your vendors certainly don't care if they have the same charger plate or centerpiece or if their linen matches the rest of the guests. It looks weird if you have like one table off to the side that's just this like sad empty table. It's gonna look odd to your guests and it just feels weird, right? So you may have to budget for extra space, extra tables, extra decor for that vendor table, though again, I highly recommend you find an alternative space for those vendors. The other part of the people cost when it comes to vendors is gratuities. I'm not going to go into too much detail on vendor gratuities. I talk about that a lot in episode 125, so make sure you go check out that episode. But you will have some categories of vendors: hair and makeup, transportation, bar service, that it is a required cost as opposed to a choice to give a gratuity or not. So again, more details in 125, but make sure you understand what you're required to pay out, because that can be an added bump to your budget. The final thing I want to talk about in this category, the people cost, is the added expenses that come up when it comes to your wedding party and your family. So most commonly, it's going to be gifts or some kind of thank you for your family, for your wedding party. And often those things are skipped in the initial breakdown of the budget. These things can certainly be very small ticket items. We don't necessarily have to talk about thousands of dollars when it comes to this. But if you have a large wedding party, or if you want it to be a more extravagant gift, that might be an area that could really increase your budget that you didn't think about in advance. Category number 3 is one of my favorites to talk about because it's going to impact just about every couple. And that is the cost for wedding attire and the cost for beauty creep that tends to creep up. The biggest culprit in this category is typically the wedding gown. For example, you break down your budget and you have $3,000 set aside for your dress. So you head into the bridal shop and you let your consultant know, we've got $3,000 as our max budget. The kicker is, though, that this breakdown of the budget typically also needs to include all of the other accessories: alterations, shoes, veil, jewelry, and even undergarments, which can be really expensive if you have to buy something very specific to fit with your gown. Alterations alone can be several $100s depending on the style of gown, fabric, and what you need to have done. When it comes to beauty, we often think about the hair and makeup for the day of the wedding, right? But where are you putting nails, spray tans, lashes, teeth whitening, hair extensions? All of the things that you may be doing in advance, is that part of your main budget, or are you paying for that separately? For some couples, you will track that separately outside of your budget, your wedding budget, right? But for others, all of that needs to be in the same pot, especially if you're tight with what you're spending. So make sure in the early stages, you're realistic about what you need to include into that. So you know that when you're telling the consultant, when you're at the dress shop, is your real budget 3,000, or does that 3,000 also need to include everything else, so that you need to tell them that your dress needs to be in the $2,000 range. So you can also have the veil, the alterations, the shoes, the jewelry, and so forth. Same with hair and makeup. Is that cost for day of truly what you're looking at just for the day of hair and makeup stylist? Or do you also need to make sure you're budgeting all of those other things into that same number? And of course, don't forget those other ancillary events like showers, engagement parties, bachelorette parties, rehearsal dinner outfits, post brunch outfits, and hair and makeup and jewelry and all of that. Some people aren't going to need to budget for any of that, but others are going to need quite a significant portion of their budget to go to those different categories. Again, none of these are wrong. They just need to be accounted for, right? All right, category number 4 is especially for those of you in a backyard wedding or in the unique venue space. I want you guys to listen closely. As you're booking your vendors, in particular for rentals like tables, chairs, linens, that kind of thing, most of the initial quotes that you're going to get are just including drop off. So you order 200 chairs, they send their team to unload the truck, drop them stacked on your driveway, and then they're done. Same with the tables, same with the linens. Setting them up, that's up to you. And same goes for tearing them down. When they show up to pick everything up, they're going to expect that they're stacked just like they drop them off. That's kind of the default when you do a rental booking like that. So you definitely want to ask, is setup included? How are these going to be delivered? And then think about what you realistically have the bandwidth for in that couple of days surrounding the wedding. So, for example, if you're in a backyard wedding, you're going to have a ton of family and friends around that can help. The chairs get dropped off Thursday, the wedding Saturday. Okay, maybe that's not that big of a deal. You can save the few $100s to have a team of people help you with setting them up. However, if you're in a venue where they have to be delivered that morning and taken away that night, you don't have a team of people, it's definitely going to be worth it to pay a little bit extra, right? So that you don't have to worry about that. Ultimately, though, I don't want it to be a surprise for you. So make sure you're checking your rental contracts so you know whether or not you need to spend a little bit extra to have some more bodies there to set things up for you, or if you think that you're going to have family and friends around to help. Other items in this logistics and setup category would be additional hours for any of your vendors. If you need to add time for your photographers, that's usually who we might need to add them in. If you need more time for your photographers, make sure you have some budgeted for that. Ceremony and cocktail hour, microphones and sound systems, especially if they're in different locations. Do you need to have an extra setup with your mic and speakers from your DJ, or can you use the setup that's being used at the reception? Make sure to ask about that. Lighting for tents, walkways, parking areas. Don't just think about what's in the tent, especially during summer months. We might be tempted to skip the lighting because it's light out so much later in the day, but make sure that you have enough lighting for guests as they're walking to their cars at midnight, making sure that the areas are safe and well lit so you don't have anybody take a tumble or get turned around. Finally, backup weather plans, again, especially for those in a backyard or a unique venue. Chances are Mother Nature is going to cooperate and you're going to have a beautiful, gorgeous day. You don't have to worry about any backup plans. However, you always want to have that plan B set up and planned for. So if you don't get that beautiful day, it's not a last minute panic to add in an extra tent or go out and purchase a ton of umbrellas for all of your guests. Whatever it might be, you want to make sure that you have that contingency plan in place already. So it's not throw money at the situation and then after the wedding, you're like, how did that happen, right? You want to know that you have a comfortable plan in place prior to the week of the event. I know it's not fun to talk about, right? Everybody wants to have that plan A perfect vision of what's going to happen. But you really need to think about it and think about what would you do if you don't get the weather forecast that you're hoping for. And for our final category, number 5, we're going to talk about the small but mighty expenses that can add up. So again, these are likely not the thousands of dollars for each one, but they really can add up. First, let's talk about postage. And I'm not just talking about the stamp that you put on the main invitation. If you're doing RSVP cards, I know these days most people are doing online RSVPs, but if you're doing the return card, the RSVP card, remember you also have to put a stamp on that envelope. Otherwise, it will 100% get forgotten by a good number of your guests and they will just get sent back to them. Also, remember that many invitations are either overweight or a unique size. So the postage for like a regular envelope may not be sufficient. Before you stamp all of your envelopes, make sure you take one of them to the post office, have them weigh it, have them make sure that it's the appropriate size, and then buy the right stamps for that envelope and that weight. Along those lines, wedding day stationery, when we talk about that, most of the time people think about invitations, right? But make sure you're also including some wiggle room for seating charts, place cards, menus, other signage that you may want throughout the day, programs for the ceremony. So the invitation budget, just like the gown budget, is not just for the dress. The stationery budget is not just for the invitations for most couples. So make sure you have a little bit of wiggle room in there for those other day of needs that you're going to have, if that's something you want to include. For hotel accommodations, most couples only think of that one night of the wedding, but likely you're going to need a hotel stay the night before, if not 2, depending on if you're staying together or not. So make sure you talk about what those couple of days around the wedding look like. If you're staying with family, if you live in the same area, then this might not be something that's going to pertain to you. But if you're traveling and you're in town, if you're coming in town Wednesday before the Thursday or Wednesday before the Saturday wedding, where are you staying Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, right? So make sure that these are things that are in your budget if they need to be, or that you've at least thought about in regards to the planning. Final note on that, even if you are local to where your wedding is going to be and you're staying in a hotel that day, you'll likely need to reserve the hotel for the night before in order to start hair and makeup on time. So hair and makeup typically starts earlier in the morning. Most hotels don't allow check-ins until like 3 or 4. So you'll either have to reserve the room or have some kind of guarantee that you'll be able to get in early enough. Most hotels will make you reserve it the night before to ensure that you have access to it early enough, because they can't guarantee an early check-in if somebody else is in that room. And finally, food and drinks for while you're getting ready and throughout the day prior to the reception. So much time and effort is put into the reception meal. It's often forgotten that like, oh yeah, all these people need to eat before that, right? So if hair and makeup is going to be a big group of people, if the guys are gathering, you're going to want to think about what those groups are eating throughout the day, making sure you have snacks throughout the day. Things to pick at are perfect for the ladies while you're getting hair and makeup done. Maybe you want some beverages on the shuttle bus, just making sure that you have something allocated in the budget for those areas. It will make sure that it's not like a huge, massive surprise once it comes down to it. Again, none of these items individually are going to totally wreck your budget. But if you add 3, 4, 5 of them up, we could be talking about going thousands and thousands over your budget. And if listening to this made you a little bit uncomfortable, that's actually good. That means that you're able to get ahead of it. You can go and look back at your budget and make sure that you've accounted for these different things. Not all of them are going to pertain to every couple, right? But think through some of these added costs. Take a look back at your contracts to make sure you understand what that real bottom line cost is going to be, and then revise your budget as needed. Remember, the budget is not something that you do once and then you're done with. You're going to need to revise it and rework it as you make decisions in the planning process. So don't feel like it's a failure if you have to go back and make adjustments. That's totally normal. I think we don't talk about that enough. The budget, again, is not done once and then it's done. You either stick to it and you win at wedding planning, or you don't stick to it and you're a big wedding planning failure. That's not how it works at all, right? As long as you're making decisions throughout the process, you're updating your budget throughout the process, and you feel comfortable with what decisions you're making, that's a win. That's what we're trying to do. Just make sure that you're anticipating and feeling comfortable with everything throughout the planning process. Now, if you're really feeling overwhelmed about all of this, inside the Planning Collective membership, I walk you through the entire process of building out your budget step by step. And it includes a customizable tracker that already accounts for these hidden categories, so you're not guessing or scrambling later. Because wedding planning shouldn't feel like a moving financial target, right? If you want more support with your budget, timelines, figuring out what actually needs to happen next, you can find all of those details at planningcollective.com/membership. And if this episode helped you at all, I would love it if you could take a quick second to rate, review, and subscribe. It will help other couples find the planning help they need, and it will mean the world to me. Thank you so much, and I will see you in the next episode.